Well, I can go ahead and get started with the intro. So good morning, everyone, and welcome to our September virtual learning session. The virtual learning series is hosted by the Region 4 Steering Committee for the region's Healthy Community Coalitions and Alliances. The virtual learning series covers a different topic each month, and this month we're happy to present suicide and mental health and suicide prevention. I want to review a few things before we get started. A disclaimer: we all know how great internet connections can be, but if we have some trouble and for some reason the session were to end before 9:30, please rejoin after 5 minutes and we have a backup connection in place for everyone. Everyone will be on mute during this session, but feel free to go ahead and type your questions in the Q&A section or the chat box, and they will be addressed at the end of the presentation. The session is being recorded and a link will be sent to all participants. There's also a tab under the Reactions tab at the bottom of your screen, and you can see Raise Hand. So if you do have a question, please feel free to use the Raise Hand option and type it in the chat. As each participant will again be on mute and no cameras during this time. If you're having a bad connection with your camera or having a bad connection, try turning your camera off because sometimes this will help boost your connection. I would like to bring up our featured speaker for today, Brittney Williams. She's with the Family Tree Jacob Crouch Suicide Prevention Services Coordinator. Brittney, I'll go ahead and turn it over to you.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you so much for having me for the virtual learning series. Please forgive me in advance if you hear my dog. When Zoom comes on, he gets very needy, so please forgive me in advance. But I'm Brittney Williams. I'm the Region 4 Suicide Prevention Coordinator with Jacob Crouch. My contact information, if you need to reach me, my number is 337-981-2180. And my email is bwilliams@acadianafamilytree.org. And I'll put that in the chat a little bit later. So of course, you know, September is National Suicide Prevention Awareness Month, and September is all things suicide prevention. And so usually during presentations, I offer what's called QPR, which is Question, Persuade, Refer. It's a suicide prevention gatekeeper training that is very, very beneficial. It teaches you the life-saving techniques to save someone's life. And so I challenge you all today to inquire more about it and definitely take advantage of that free training. So without further ado, I'll jump into a little bit of suicide prevention. So of course, like I said, September is National Suicide Prevention Month. Just to give you an overview of how suicide is so prevalent and so common right now, in the United States, over 47,511 people died by suicide in 2019. And that makes suicide the 10th leading cause of death in the United States. And on average, if you think about it, every 11 minutes that passes by, someone dies by suicide in the United States. And so that's on average 130 suicides per day. If you want to look at a good scope of per day, give me just a So knowing that those rates are climbing and the numbers are steady increasing, some things we're going to focus on today is exactly not so much as why people die by suicide, but we will talk about that a little bit, but we want to address how we can prevent suicide from happening. And so a good thing, what I like to tell people is we must be comfortable with having uncomfortable conversations. For so long, suicide has been filled with so much stigma and shame and people not really knowing how to address the topic. We usually just kind of skate around it. And that's why I love suicide prevention so much, because I like talking about the uncomfortable things. And when you're talking about suicide prevention, just you all today hearing this presentation, you're coined gatekeepers. Gatekeepers is a term that was coined by the Surgeon General, anybody working in any suicide preventative measures. And so when you become gatekeepers, a gatekeeper looks at the problem, which is suicide, and then they span out and look at how this is affecting our community. And then that is when you start to put in preventative measures as to what it is that we can do within our community to stop this problem. And a good example that I love to use is the Golden Gate Bridge. The Golden Gate Bridge has been the #1 place where people die by suicide since being built since 1937. And so the Golden Gate Bridge Port Authority and all of the people that help to make sure this architectural structure is running to its full capacity, they said suicide prevention is everybody's business. We can take on the preventative measures as gatekeepers. So they looked at this problem that people were jumping to their death at the Golden Gate Bridge, and they spanned back to see what is it that we can do to our community and do for our community to stop this problem. So what they took on was a $1 billion suicide deterrent project, which what's going to happen is they're building a suicide deterrent net that when people jump from the Golden Gate Bridge, it will catch them. And then they will wrap them around with services and follow them for a duration of time, just to make sure that there are not other suicide attempts. But when you think about suicide in all its many layers, what you want to do is not only focus on the warning signs, because people have been trained, some not, to know what the warning signs are. But what I always question and challenge people to do is to dig beyond the warning signs. If you start to see behavior that is questionable, or you start to see a change in people, that is when you have to question the behaviors that you're seeing. And so when you're working with people that are suicidal, this is something that I say all the time. You have to be in the moment with them. And when I say in the moment with them, when you're talking with someone that's possibly suicidal and you're on that other end of asking the suicide question, you have to be in the moment, because what you're doing is not only are you asking them, are you suicidal, but you're getting ready to indulge in all the layers and layers of the internalized emotions that that person has. And so I always reference it to, it's like unscrewing a water bottle. We don't know the layers and layers of trauma, what that person has been through. And so I always say, people that are on the preventative side, that is in the helping role, we have to be mindful of how we approach people. We have to be mindful of our mannerisms and the things that we say. And the biggest thing that I hear all the time from people is, I don't want to say the wrong thing. I don't want to put the thought in their heads. Well, let me assure you that suicide doesn't work that way. There is not a wrong thing. The only wrong thing is not asking someone if they're suicidal. And you can't put the thought of suicide in anyone's head by asking them, because it doesn't work that way. The thought is either there or it isn't. And studies have shown that when you directly ask someone if they're suicidal or have thoughts of killing themselves, it's going to help to lower their anxiety. And when you start to lower that anxiety, that gets the communication piece going, that gets them talking. And I love to say this, the more we have someone talking that's suicidal, that's minutes, seconds, and hours that they're still alive. And so when you engage in that conversation with someone that's suicidal, what you're looking for is, for one, what's gotten them to that point? 2, do you have a plan? 3, and you're also looking for their reason to live, because everybody has a reason to live. Just like you and I that's on this webinar today. We had something that woke us up this morning, whether it was we can't afford to stay asleep, whether we're just waiting to hit the Powerball to not have to work anymore. We all get up for a reason, and we're all getting up to work for something. And so people that are suicidal, I love to tell people that are in the process of helping someone that is struggling with suicidal thoughts, you always look for a turning point. That turning point is just that, their reason to live. And so it could be family, friends, anybody that they're waiting, that's keeping them there. So when you're engaging in anything that's suicide prevention related, you want to make sure that you're very attentive. With me being in social service field, and probably some of you all, we're so used to helping. We're so used to being the resolver, the problem solver. And so with suicide prevention, it's more of a slower process, because not only is the person that's struggling the client, but they're the expert of their life. So they know what they need. They may not know exactly at that point. And so that's why it's very important for us to be attentive and really listen. A good statement, what I like to use is, what is it that you think can help keep you here? What is it that you need? And that's it, sharing the responsibility and the role with the person that's struggling with suicide, but also it's helping you navigate what they need. And I love to say we have to steer the vehicle together when we're working with people that are suicidal, because not only as professionals, we hate to be blindsided. And when I say blindsided, if we're working with someone that's showing suicidal thoughts or actively suicidal, if we come in and say, you need to do this, this, and this is what we're going to do, that may be triggering for some people. So we have to be mindful of how we work with them, but then getting back into understanding that suicide is happening at very high rates here in Louisiana as well. The primary cause of that, if you start to look at some of our rural areas, when you look at those rural areas, we sometimes have low socioeconomic status. We also have low access to resources. There may not be a grocery store within a few miles from us. There's not public transportation. There's not a lot of job opportunities in some of the rural areas. So you start to see some of those decrease in those suicides in some of our rural areas. And that is simply because it's filled with a lot of hopelessness and despair, wanting to do better, but not necessarily having the means to do what you need to do. And so looking at that in a more deeper perspective, when we think about means in suicide prevention, Louisiana, over 55% is attributed to firearms, people dying by firearms. And that is simply because Louisiana is a wildlife and fishery state. We are a sportsman paradise. We love hunting. We love all of those things. And when you think about the mechanisms in which people die by suicide, firearms are the number one within Louisiana. But what I always encourage people and tell people is you want to decrease the access to means. And so if firearms or any of the other means are in the home, you want to get rid of the means. Preferably with firearm, we prefer firearm to be completely out of the home, or if the firearm is, it is completely unloaded, locked away, and the ammunition is not in the home, preferably completely out of the home. But moving forward and thinking about not only the means and things like that, some warning signs. Warning signs are just not necessarily strong wish to die or mental health issues or things like that. Sometimes the clues and warning signs can be in a different area, such as behavioral. Maybe it's behavioral clues where there's a shift in the behavior externally and internally. There's also situational clues. Situational clues are things that have happened or just maybe popped up in your life and causes someone to start showing those warning signs because what's going on. And a situational clue, what I always highlight is COVID-19. That is something that popped up and we didn't even think it would be here that long. We didn't even think we would have to be so innovative on how we went to the grocery store or how we congregated with family members and all of those things. And there also can be physical cues. Physical clues and cues of those natures can be physical symptoms that our body manifests. For example, stress, chronic headaches, changes in sleep patterns, and all of those things, anxiety attacks, panic attacks. So I always encourage people to don't get stuck on the traditional warning signs that are highlighted and all of those things, but sometimes it's a little bit deeper and it goes a little bit beyond what meets the eye. And when you start to see a shift in someone's behavior, or you start to see them deviate from things that are not their necessary norm, that's when you start to question, like, what's been going on? How are you? Is there anything that you want to talk about? Those are questions and introductional questions that can open the door to kind of get that behavior or see if that person is actually suicidal. And what I always tell people is people walk around and they mask things really, really well. If someone is depressed, they're not crying or moping all the time. They're very, very functional. For example, I love to use the commercial with the depression medication when the dark cloud is following the person all over the picture. Suicide and depression doesn't work that way. People, like I said, they mask things really, really well, and they only show you what's on the surface, those surface emotions. They don't show you what's internally. So whenever people say, oh, I know the warning signs, I know all about them, a lot of times people will hear the warning signs. I've encountered situations to where you hear the warning signs just piling up. and then you have to go in and ask the person, are they suicidal? So we may not actually always see it, because guess what? People that are suicidal usually don't communicate their intent of dying by suicide until the week preceding the death. So you're not going to get it in splurts and over a month's period of time. You may just get a little bit, and then the suicide happens. So we must train ourselves to be vigilant and really check in on one another. And as far as mental health issues, people that die by suicide, approximately about 90% had a diagnosable mental health issue. So it does play hand in hand, but sometimes it can be other underlying things, not always necessarily mental health issues, but it does play a huge role in some individuals that die by suicide. And so thinking about resources and things of those sorts, I always recommend, we hear the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline number. That is an awesome number, but I love to tell people the pros and the cons of it. So just like any hotline, that is what the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline number is. When you dial the number, they say press 1 if you're a veteran and press 2 if you're not. And then you hear a nice little musical tone, and then they place you in a queue until a counselor answers. And so if someone is actively suicidal, that is not always the best resource for them. And I tell people this completely honest and transparent, to be completely honest and transparent about it. It's not always the best resource for them. But an alternative is, if you have someone that is not actively suicidal, the crisis text line is amazing. A lot of mental health organizations use it. It is 741-741. You can text home, help, sad. You can text NAMI, whatever the case may be. And it takes you to a text message. So it says, thank you for texting the crisis text line. Are you texting on behalf of yourself or someone else? If you're texting for someone else, you click the link and it takes you to a wonderful array of resources that can assist you working with whomever that person is. But if it's you, you just text, and they say, what's your crisis? And you just text what's going on. At any time you can text stop, and it is no additional charge. Whomever your cell phone provider is, whatever the standard rate of your text messages is, it's the same thing. So it's not an overcharge or anything like that. But I also encourage different apps on your phone. There are quite a few apps. SAMHSA has an amazing suicide prevention app for educators, clinical people, professionals that you can put on your phone. And resources are huge when you're working with people that are suicidal. You always want to make sure you know what your resources are, and you always want to make sure that your resource is a valid, genuine resource, because when you're working with people that are suicidal, I love to say you want to give them a warm handoff to the resource. And a warm handoff is safely giving that person over, knowing that they won't fall through the gaps, and not counting on a person that's suicidal to reach out for help themselves, because they're already in the toughest place. And so we can't count on them to make sure that they're going to get the resource. So people that are working with people that are suicidal, you have to do more. And that can mean taking them directly to the resource, or making sure that it is lined up and arranged to where that person is not falling through the gaps. And I'm trying to think of, is there anything else that I have forgotten? And I think I'll stop right there just to take a few questions, or if anything popped up, Miss Renee, because I'm thinking about when I'm naturally doing a presentation, but I'm making sure that I don't want to miss anything. So I'll stop right there for a second and answer some questions if there are any.
Sure. There's none in the chat box. Q&A.
Okay.
Well, in the chat box, there's not, but in Q&A, what should someone do if they see the signs of suicide in someone?
If you see the signs of suicide in someone, the first thing you want to do is you want to ask, are you suicidal? Are you having thoughts of killing yourself? But if you're not comfortable with asking, the next best thing is to get them to someone who can. And so if, hypothetically, if there's no one else around, you want to call 911. You don't want to put yourself in harm's way, because murder suicides are on the rise as well, where they take other people and themselves. So if you don't feel like you have the capacity to ask the suicide question, you definitely get them to someone that can. But all you do when you're asking the suicide question is you just mention things that's troubling you, or mention things that you've seen. For example, I may say, hey, Renee, I've seen over the past couple of days that you haven't been yourself lately. Have you been unhappy, or is there anything going on? And I just listen. You may say, yeah, I've been unhappy. I haven't been sleeping lately. I just don't feel like myself, or whatever the case may be. My next response is to say, when people feel as though you're feeling, or showing emotions and things the way you are, they sometimes think about suicide. Are you? And then I just listen, either yes or no, because not everybody will be suicidal. Some people are just really stressed. As professionals, we've all had a stressful day to where we just need to unplug, unwind, and just be to ourselves for a little bit. So you have to rule out if that person is truly suicidal, and you just listen. You attach back to them and relay back to them what they've told you, and then you ask a suicide question. And once you ask the suicide question and you confirm that they are, you want to get an idea of, do you have a plan? Do you have a plan as to how you would die by suicide, or have you thought of anything? Because now you need to know if they're okay to return home if they're not actively suicidal. You want to eliminate access to the means, or if they have a plan and it includes whatever, we want to make sure that we're not leaving them alone and to their own vices to possibly die by suicide. So in the initial steps, those are some of the questions that you want to ask. Just mention the things that have been troubling you, or things that you've seen thus far. And then the next step is you start asking a suicide question. And asking a suicide question can really be very intimidating and really scary at times. But rest assured, if you're not comfortable with asking, you just find somebody who can. And if you don't have anybody, you dial 911. And if 911 comes, I usually say you just let that person know what's going to happen before you take over the situation. Like, hey, I see that you're suicidal, and I thank you for sharing that with me. I thank you for trusting me with such a vulnerable part of you. But what we need to do is call 911, and they can better assist you than I can, but we can all work together, because what we're trying to do is build your support network. And so when 911 comes, they most likely will take you to the emergency room, and then they're gonna do such and such and such and such. So you just update the person, because suicidal people will be very, very resistant because they feel like they can't be held. Nobody can possibly understand what I'm going through, and nobody can possibly be experiencing what I'm experiencing. So that's why, as people that are gatekeepers and people that are on the preventative side and helping, you have to do more. And it's almost, you're going to be met with that resistance. It's almost like bumping heads, but you have to stick in it and show them that there's light at the end of the tunnel, because they're going to, when you're in that deep, dark place, you can't always see the resolution. You can't always see that the problem is fixable. And so sometimes you have to really, really get in there and do more and show them that it's fixable. Like, this is how we can help you, but I want you to tell me, what is it that you need as the expert of your life? And even if they say, I don't know what I need, I just know I don't want to be here, or I just know I want to die. All you do is assure them and be empathetic. I understand those emotions, and I know it's really tough for you what you're experiencing. And it seems like you have so much resiliency and strength. Who supports you? Who's in your life that supports you when you're in this dark time? With that question, you're kind of identifying the support system. And so that also helps you, as well as navigating the help journey and what they need.
Great, thanks. And the next question is, how do you tell if it's regular teenager situations a child is going through, or if they may be considering suicide? Like, is there a warning, or?
Usually it's all in what they demonstrate, some of those warning signs. But with teenagers don't like to talk about a lot of things, and they're not very easily to trust. And I've heard this countless times when I do teenage presentations. We don't trust people easily. We don't like a lot of people in our business. They internalize things a lot. They keep a lot in. And when it eventually piles up, the way teenagers think is either black or white. There's no in between. It's either really good or really all bad. And so with teenagers, you really have to get in there and really dig deep to figure out what's going on, because they're not very forthcoming. But you kind of have to tread the waters very, very lightly, because they're so sensitive. I've had teenagers all the time say, my parents just don't understand. They feel like what they went through is the same, and it's not the same. And I agree. The times have changed, and how we handle the situations are very, very different. With teenagers, you may see a shift in their behavior. And one of the number one warning signs and clues is loss of a major relationship, breakups. When teenagers experience breakups or different things of that sort, that pushes them over the edge. When teenagers start to isolate themselves from family or friends, engaging in high risk behavior, or angry or aggressive or moody all the time, those are some of the things that you look at. Just not being their normal self. And if you have a teenager that some parents may say, well, they're not their normal self all the time, I don't know what they're going through, you definitely want to check in. If you start to see a lot of isolation, where they're just withdrawing or staying to their room, not really coming down much, the door is closed, what I always encourage parents of teenagers, or parents in general that may know teenagers, is create the space. Because the space is not going to be created overnight, but you just nurture and water the space. And when I say that, maybe a teen likes to be in their room, they don't like to talk about much. You can gently break the ice by saying, maybe it's me, I don't know what's going on, but I want you to know that I'm here if you ever want to talk. They may say, I don't want to talk about anything, you don't understand, blah, 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 whatever the case may be. What a parent then can oftentimes say is, whenever you feel like you want to talk, I'm here. But I'll be checking on you. If you're in your room, I'll be checking on you every 5 minutes, if that's okay. And sometimes I may even come in. And I don't know what you need. Only you know what you need. If you just need me to be there to support you, I'm there. If you need a shoulder to cry on, I'm there. If you need to vent, I'm there. Sometimes with teenagers, just being in their presence, just being, allowing them to just whatever they're experiencing or whatever they're going through, just knowing that you're there. I definitely always encourage parents or whatever with teens not to let them seclude themselves, but don't be a helicopter parent, just hovering, but checking in on them periodically, like getting on a time system. Like, parent knows every 5 minutes, I go check on them, bring them a little snack or something, or see if they're okay, just to get a visual of them, see them, because 15 to 24, suicide is their second leading cause of death. So a lot of things happen in their life, and mental health issues start to surface in that young adult age. So a lot of things they go through, but they go through internally. They keep it to themselves, or they share with other friends. I've had that a lot, where they share with other friends. And I always pose the question to friends, if she's pouring from an empty cup and you're pouring from an empty cup, how is it that you all can help each other? And then they start to think, well, maybe we need to talk to someone. But teenagers always have one trusted adult that they trust, that they can talk to about anything. And so always keep that in mind. It can be an aunt, it can be a coach, it can be a teacher. But with teenagers, you always want to just be mindful of their behavior, because usually you'll start to see a shift in their behavior is what you'll really notice with them.
Okay, great. Thank you, Brittney. There's no other questions at this time.
Yeah. And so making sure that I didn't leave anything out. With Jacob Crouch, we also have a Survivors of Suicide support group. That is a completely free group. You just have to call the family tree and sign up to do an intake. And an intake is where the counselor meets the survivor and they do like a mini counseling session. And we only do that because we understand that grief is different for everybody. Brittney may be in her grief journey that I'm angry that they died. Renee may be in her grief journey saying that I'm at peace with it. So we do the little mini intake session to make sure that, for one, the support group is right for them, because we don't want to send anybody off to the support group prematurely. Making sure that they're at a good space and a mental capacity to where they're okay. Because when people get in the support group, we allow them to talk freely and holistically. We just let it flow. And so once they do that, they're welcome to the support group. They get a welcome packet. We talk about resources. We have a resource library for them where they can check out books about grief or loss. And then from there, they have full access to the support group. We don't disclose the location or anything of that sort until that person is accepted into the support group. Because, for example, if a family has lost a loved one by suicide and maybe there's a spouse involved, sometimes emotions can run high. So we want to make sure that everybody is safe and that we're not causing any unnecessary trauma or anything for that person. So that's a perk that we have as well, the Survivors of Suicide Support Group. We also have our QPR training. Like I said in the beginning, it's completely free for any organizations, any community organizations, any businesses, or anybody that works in suicide prevention. We offer a virtual option and we offer an in-person option. So those are some of the services that we offer. And of course, the Family Tree is well known for their counseling services and their educational classes. But I encourage you all to definitely like the Family Tree's Facebook page. Also check out our website. We post all of our educational things and things that we have coming up. The QPR training is usually an hour, hour and a half, maximum 2 hours. It's very flexible with how much time is given based on who the crowd that we're presenting to. So if you say, Brittney, we want this suicide prevention presentation, but all we have is an hour, it's usually condensed to suffice for the time given. So if it's 2 hours, it suffices for that. But I always encourage people to check on your loved ones. Elderly suicide is on the rise as well. People feeling like they're a burden, or people just away from their natural element. People die every single day. Checking on people is huge, because so many times we get caught in the monotony of our workday, and we say, hey, I may need to check on this person, or I haven't talked to this person in a while. People struggle silently. Especially in the wake of COVID and just the stressors of being with this horrible thing that came about, COVID-19, and just having to adapt. And then it's hurricane season. And God forbid if you stay in an area that is affected, that's a stressor. That's a situational clue when things happen unexpectedly and you have to kind of put the pieces together. So I encourage you all that is here today to check on someone that's been on your mind or on your heart that you maybe forgot to check on your family and friends and loved ones, because people struggle every single day and people die from suicide every single day. But until we start having a tough conversation and normalizing that it's okay to not be okay, that is when the true prevention starts. And that's when we'll start to see a decline in those numbers. We have to start talking about suicide. We don't see it in obituaries and we don't see it in the newspaper or things of that sort, because there's still that shame and embarrassment. But I always tell people, if you have a loved one that dies by suicide, suicide doesn't define their legacy or who they were. What you have now is your voice. Your voice is to shine a light that suicide has happened, and here's how we're moving forward and preventing another family, a friend, a coworker from feeling this way. And so that is my soapbox. That is my spiel for today. Thank you guys for having me. I hope that I've kind of touched a little bit on suicide and how we can work to prevent it from happening.
Brittney, there is a question that came in. How can you help someone improve their mental health so it doesn't get to the point of suicide?
When you're working with people that have mental health issues, for one, we have to make sure that they're seeing someone, so maintenance or regular updates or checkups. If they're having if they're on any medications, you want to make sure that the medicine is very regulated for them, because a lot of times people may be taking medication that they've had and it just needs to be tweaked or regulated. So that means they need to go back into see if the medication is working. If it's not working, maybe up the dosage or lower the dosage. But with mental health issues, it's really kind of a double-edged sword, because sometimes people diagnose themselves. They haven't been really properly diagnosed. And then a lot of times that's just like with suicide. People don't take mental health issues serious. And I'll use myself, for example, the African-American community, as far as I can remember as a child, that was something that people joked about. Oh, he or she is off their meds. And so we have to make sure that we're not only taking it serious, just like suicide, but making sure that if that person is showing signs of possible mental health issues, that we're getting them to the help that they need, getting them in to see the doctor. If they're on medicines, when's the last time you've had your medicine regulated or checked on? Do you have maintenance? Maintenance is, are you seeing anyone, maybe a mental health counselor, making sure that the person has daily maintenance of whatever they have. That helps to keep them from slipping into that place of suicidal ideation. And so just making sure that they're healthy, because you still can have a mental health issue, but still be an active, wholesome person and healthy. And so making sure that you know what the resources are, because a lot of times people don't even know what resources are available or out there if they're suffering from mental health issues. And a number one thing, what I say as well, looking at your family lineage. Does mental health run in the family? Did mom have anything? Grandmother, whatever the case may be. And sometimes getting checked out to make sure you're not flying under the radar and haven't been diagnosed yet. So making sure that if it's a family history, making sure that you're okay. And so those are some tidbits that I would recommend.
So Brittney, how would you be able to tell if it was situational or if that family lineage was coming in and playing a part?
You're saying if it's a situational clue that someone may be going through?
Right. Like I know you were mentioning earlier that it may be like situational, like a breakup or this, something, or a storm, or how do you tell that versus, or is it a part of that lineage? Like, my dad committed suicide or his brother committed suicide, so I may do it. So how can you tell?
You mainly just have to most likely ask the person. That's the only way you're going to get insight as to if something has happened. And generational suicide is something that's kind of not on the rise, but people question, like, if grandpa died by suicide and father died by suicide, then that person is likely to die by suicide. It doesn't always work that way, but you do see that sometimes where people have passed away within the family to suicide. But the only way to get insight is to sit down with that person and ask them what's been going on, what's been happening, or what's been going on. And then that gives you the insight to say, this is maybe a situational clue, because a situational clue can be assault, bullying, financial problems. It can be loss of a loved one. It can be major breakup. It can be, what else? Trying to think. Diagnosis of a terminal illness. So all of these things are different situations that can cause someone to say suicide as an option. So you just have to ask them. But if it's somebody that you're close to and that you may be a little bit on the inside of knowing what's going on with that person. And so you just really have to monitor their behavior and just really check in and see what's going on with them.
Okay, thanks. We have some comments in the chat. Great information. I agree. Thanks for sharing this information. And there's another question. How can you help someone who doesn't want help, or they're in denial and an alcoholic, refuse to reason, resent the fact that you make a suggestion that they need help because upset if you even mention it? So how do you help someone that doesn't want the help or doesn't want to acknowledge it?
So if this is hypothetically a family member or someone, maybe a client that some of you all work with, you will have to steer the vehicle. And when I say steer the vehicle, they're already in denial. And we already talked previously that suicidal people believe they can't be helped. So there will be a lot of resistance. All you do is update them, because now they're in danger to themselves and they can't make any sound decisions because they don't want to. And a lot of times people struggling in the midst of it can't see what we see. And so that is a situation where you have to take control and just update them as what's going to happen. And if it's a family member, making sure that you have support systems surrounding you to support them, and building a united front and alliance to say, we have to get this family member help, and this is what it's going to look like. And sometimes you have to not necessarily force that person, but you have to arrange it against their own will. You have to say, this is what's going to take place. Because if they're in denial and they're struggling with substance, those are already warning signs there. Substance abuse, whether it's drugs or alcohol, in denial, moody, angry, aggressive behavior, irritability, all of the warning signs are there. So now you need to arrange the help for them and possibly take them there. And they will be resistant. They will be angry. That's the sad nature of it. But now, since that person is showing some of those warning signs, you have to do what you have to do. And that means you have to steer the vehicle and get them to help. And the resistance and the denial, that's just, sometimes you're going to be met with that. But if you see a person struggling like that, you have to arrange it yourself and just say, this is what's going to happen.
Okay, great. Thank you. And more comments are coming in. Thank you, Brittney. Great and valuable information. A second part to the question: mental health runs in the person's family, but no one for generations have addressed it. The person gets mad and with you when you even ask. So how do you handle that situation? I know you spoke about it just a minute ago, but how do you, I guess, maybe address it without it seeming like you're addressing it? Like, how do you, I guess, camouflage the questions? Or, I know you were mentioning earlier to be direct, but what if being direct isn't the option and you're trying to camouflage the help that you're providing to them? Is there a way to do that? Is it good to do that? Like, what are your thoughts and suggestions for that situation?
You can have direct ways and you can have indirect. So let's just say the person gets angry. When they get angry, you can say, based on how you feel and your reaction, where's that coming from? And you just listen, you let them talk. But usually when someone, and that's just going back to me as a person, when someone gets angry and defensive, you know it's something. That person knows internally that it's something. And so that goes back to, as people within society, we have to be better at how we talk about mental health issues. And we have to normalize it to let people know nothing is wrong, because instantly when you hear mental health issues, people automatically think I'm crazy. Oh my goodness. And so if the family if there's a family history of mental health issues and things like that, sometimes it's very scary and intimidating, because everybody, when you grow up from a child up to now, you think I'm going to be a healthy, happy adult, blah, 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 blah. And then you fall into a space of, I'm just like the people in my family. When in all actuality, there's nothing wrong with having a mental health issue. We just want to make sure that people know how to handle it. And so if you have a person that's getting upset about it, it can be hard to face the truth of, I have this, or it's hard to face the truth to come to terms with, I may have this, so that you just really have to approach the situation very delicately, and just say, you may have to take away mental health issues. That term sometimes scares people and cause them to be on high alert or get aggressive or angry, and don't put that on me, so you may have to engage in a conversation of, how have you been feeling lately? And just help normalize it. Like if they say, I can't sleep at night, or my mind is racing, I have that problem sometimes too. Here's what I do. I have a counselor that I talk to, or I have a lot of great resources that kind of can help. You may have to kind of take away some of those frightening terms and terminologies. For example, like when people say suicide, people still say committed suicide or that doesn't. So we try to change the lingo and the terminology to let people know it's okay, because a lot of things are fueled by your emotions. If someone is suicidal or struggling with mental health issues, it's okay. But here's how we can help. Nothing is making you, nothing is wrong with you. You're still an individual, you're still a normal person. You just have some extra baggage. And here's how we can unload that. Here's a good resource. Or here's what I do. I struggle with anxiety. I talk to a counselor. And not to say counselor meaning you're crazy, just someone that doesn't know you and that's non-judgmental, and you can unload all of that. So you just kind of have to change the conversation to where people feel comfortable. Because, and I always use myself. The best bet is to use yourself as a personal example. I remember a few years back where I would come home and I would just be mopey and sad all the time. And I was like, I need some help. And I just remember taking that first step to even look into getting a counselor. I thought I hit rock bottom. I was a crying mess all the time. I was like, oh my goodness, what has my life come to? But then I took a step back and said, they wouldn't make counselors or this profession if people didn't need it. They wouldn't make this profession if it wasn't for us to utilize. And once I started attending counseling, I love it. I encourage people, somebody else that I can unload the weight of my shoulders to. I don't have to carry that baggage. Sometimes you just need someone to talk to help unload. And even when I talked to my mom about it, she was like, what do you need counseling for? Because I'm an African American, I am Baptist, and we were taught to just pray about it and it'll go away. And that does not work. And I tell people all the time, you have to take care of your mental health issues before you can take care of spiritual and all of that thing. Don't tell me about praying, because right now the prayer is not working. So you just have to normalize it. That is okay. And then in return, my mom was like, I think I need to talk to someone. So once you start to normalize it and people see, because I talk about my counselor all the time. I'm like, oh my goodness, it's going on 2 weeks. I haven't talked to my counselor. I got so much to tell her. Once you start to normalize it and people see, like, you have a counselor, that's in your routine, then it helps to break down those walls. But my mom couldn't understand it. Then you have a good childhood. She couldn't understand it. So we just have to normalize that it's okay to not be okay. And if you're struggling, I'm here for you if you need to talk and get you some help. Because as people, we don't always make it a safe place and a non-judgmental place to where people can be forthcoming and bare their souls or bare the most ugly part of them. So we have, as people, as the helpers, we have to be mindful of our image, what we're portraying too. Do we make it easier for people to come to us if they're struggling with their mental health issues or need help? And if there's a family that has that running in the family, I can almost guarantee you that it has not been easy for that family navigating this mental health issue, because people in the family joke about it, or people don't take it serious. Or sometimes when people are in the midst of mental health issues, they don't always know the next step. And so sometimes family members can get discouraged, like they say they won't help or they're not really serious about it. So it's a lot of different layers when you navigate mental health, just as well as suicide. But all you have to do, you normalize it, and you just still work with that person. You still offer them that help. You still genuinely and empathetically open that door for them to say, I see that talking about this makes you angry. What part about it makes you angry? See, they may say, just knowing that I have this makes me angry, or I don't want to be labeled crazy. You have to uncover some of the negative cognitions that the person has. And that's going to help make it a little bit smoother to get the help that they need. And so I hope that I answered that to the best of my ability, because I always use myself. I love counseling. I'm a big advocate. That is my monthly maintenance for myself. But once you start to normalize it.
Great, Brittney. Thank you. I think that was great. Actually, we have about 9 minutes left. We have two questions. If a parent found out from their child's friends that they were contemplating suicide, but the child doesn't want to open up about it, what options or what can the parent do to help their child?
That is a touchy area, but here's what you do. You have to tell them that the friend told them. That's going to break that trust bond that they have. And that friendship may take a hard hit, but at that point, it's all about saving their life. So you have to go to your child and let them know, it's been brought to my attention that you've been contemplating suicide. And I just want you to know that we're here for you, and we want to save your life. What is it that you need? You're going to have to break that trust, because that's a big thing. What we say, don't keep secrets, be forthcoming, let them know that you know. Because guess what? All of the key players, that's your support system. So I know, I'll say me and Renee are friends. I'll say, Renee discussed to me that you're suicidal, but guess what? We're all your support system. So I know you may be angry. You may have not wanted us to find out about it, but I don't want you to suffer by yourself. And we have to get you some help. What would it look like? Are you willing to get help? Will you allow us all to help you? Because we're here to support you in whatever you need. You just offer them that support, but you still put the moving pieces together to start aligning the resources. But you have to disclose it. You have to go straight in and just let them know, because that time matters. When someone is suicidal, minutes, seconds, hours matter. Because if they told a friend this yesterday and it's a new day, we don't know when the suicide can happen. So we have to jump on it.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
This one, how do you handle it internally, knowing that someone doesn't like you or hates you, for trying to help them? How do you deal with that internally if you're the person reaching out to someone who is suicidal?
Mm-hmm.
How do you deal with it internally, knowing that you helped save their life and you had to, help them, but now they dislike you or have, a hatred towards you?
Mm-hmm. As a suicide prevention person, gatekeeper, you have to extend yourself some grace. And when I say extend yourself some grace, when you uncover that someone is suicidal and bring to the surface and all of the action starts to take place, they will be angry. They will not like you, whatever the case may be. But I always say an angry person is better than a dead person. And that anger will later turn into gratitude. I don't know how long it's going to take. If I knew that, I would be a-okay. But we don't know how long that's going to take. So don't harbor those feelings. Don't put them on. Don't put that feeling on, because you did what you needed to do in the process. Even though they still can't see the value of their life and the love you have for them to even put the action in, the plan in action, don't put that on. Extend yourself some kindness, and you just have to take that weight off of you. Don't harbor their feelings, because their feelings are internalized with other things that they have going on. Remember that layer and layer of trauma. So that may be something that they have to work through. Don't put it on. Please don't personally put it on, because guess what? That can lead you into anxiety, and you start demonstrating some of the warning signs because you're so caught up on this person's feelings for you. Don't put it on, because guess what? That backpack gets heavy. Don't put those feelings and emotions on, because suicidal people, in the midst of it and trying to get help, they say a lot of things. They say a lot of things that's hurtful, and it may portray to you. Because guess what? When you're in the front and you're in the front and center and you're that helping person, you're in the line of fire. Everything is coming to you. So please don't put that on. I always encourage you to kind of just let it roll off of you. And it's hard, but don't put that on just every day. Don't put it on, because it's not directed for you, if that makes sense. It's more so, I'm angry with myself that I got to the point of being suicidal and people had to pull it out of me and help me. So please don't put that on. Don't put the emotions, the negativity and all of those things. Don't put it on.
And you just had a comment in the chat that's saying that they completely agree with that, and they've personally seen it and had that happen.
Because they will be angry. I always tell people they will be angry, because it's hard being in that space, and it's hard to even be forthcoming to say that I'm in such a vulnerable place. And so when you pull off that Band-Aid of where that sore spot is, and all of that stuff starts to spill over, you're going to get it's going to spill over on you, but don't put it on, just kind of wipe it off. That's it. That's just generic as I can say. Don't take it personal. Don't take things personal, because when you're in despair, when you're going through an emotional time, me as professionals, when we're going through emotional turmoil or something has happened that has shifted our emotions, it takes us a little while to come down off of it. And just like you and I, that suicidal person, it's going to take them a while, because we don't know how much treatment they may need or what they exactly need. So as they're figuring it out, it will be filled with a lot of different emotions. So don't stress yourself out or put that on for yourself.
Okay, that was perfect time. And Brittney, there's no other questions or comments in the chat. And I just thank you so much. It was a great presentation, very informational for all of our attendees.
Thank you
So
all
we
for
thank
having
you.
me. Thank you. And I'll put my contact number and my email in the chat in case anybody needs to reach me.
Yes, and I just wanted to remind that all participants, the QPR training, Brittney is available to do that for your organization or your group. So feel free to reach out to her. And I just wanted to thank everyone for attending today's webinar. Remember, we will be sending out our schedule because we do these each month. So we look forward to having you on our future webinars, and you have a great day. Thank you.
Thank you all. Have a good one. Stay safe.